Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. And I'm Maria Jose. And I like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Italian Ministry of Health, who is hosting this national call. It's a pleasure being here with all of you. And I am a scientific officer and member of the team involved in the Secretariat. Before starting, I must inform you that the event is being recorded, and all slides and links will be visible on the ERA PerMed website. As you have read in the agenda, the event starts with the welcome from our director, and after the introduction of the ERA PerMed, the description of the main points of the call, and two interesting talks about ELSA implication and big data and in artificial intelligence and on implementation of the research and patient collaboration. We have decided to postpone the question to the end, because we had registered more than 700 people, and we have already received several questions that we try to respond during our talks. However, this larger number might be difficult to interact with the audience via chat, so we are using Mentimeter to interact with the audience. You are invited to ask and reply your question in this platform during the event. Please take note of the login information and the code in this slide. We will try to answer you all the questions at the end of the event, but don't worry, we have no time to reply because all the questions will be answered in a fact document that will be published on the website. Lastly, we wish to thank our speakers, participants, my colleagues from the Secretariat, from the ERA PerMed, the GAR team for the kind contribution. Then, first of all, we want to present you Dr. Gaetano Guglielmi, Health Officer and Director General from the Research and Innovation in Healthcare from the Italian Ministry of Health. Dr. Guglielmi, the floor is yours.
Okay. Many thanks for your participation in the informative day. Personalized medicine represents a change from a one-size-fits-all approach to an optimized strategy for prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of disease for each person, based on her unique biological characteristics. To strengthen the global effort on personal medicine and the cooperation between countries, the European Commission has supported this ERNet co-fund together with 32 partners from 23 countries. ERA PerMed is closely linked to the International Consortium for Personal Medicine, EC PerMed, established in November 2016, and nowadays is starting its second phase. In the field of the personal medicine, the Ministry of Health is involved in EC PerMed, in ERA PerMed, in other different initiatives, always part of this big EC PerMed family as associated member of PerMed, CSA Central Clinical Trial, and we are involved in CSA with Africa starting this year. However, I would like to highlight ERA PerMed, that is the acronym of the Widening EU-CELAC policy and research cooperation in personal medicine, with the ambition of to engage LAC countries in the EC PerMed, in the ERA PerMed as vehicle for funding projects by competitive calls advancing in the implementation of the action plan of EC PerMed, based in the strategic research and innovation agenda drafted by PerMed 2020 and with the vision 2030 of EC PerMed. And as a result, we are happy to have on board on LAC representation with Brazil, Chile, and Panama, and this call and a budget estimated for more than 1 million. Going back to ERA PerMed, it fostered the implementation of the action plan built up for EC PerMed by funding transnational research projects in the field of personal medicine. And this is the basis of the structure of the call in the 3 areas of research. First, translating basic to clinical research and beyond. Second, data and information and communication technology. And third, research towards responsible implementation in healthcare. ERA PerMed aims to align regional and national research strategy and funding activity and foster cooperation between the various contributions in personal medicine. In this way, we are promoting excellent research, improving competitiveness of European contributors to personal medicine, and enhancing European collaboration with non-EU countries. Among keywords at the purpose are bioinformatics, biostatistics, clinical omics, artificial intelligence, big data, health research, research funding, organization, international research, health technology assessment, ethical, legal, and social aspect, prevention, healthcare, population, patient, and citizen. ERA PerMed seeks to facilitate all this multidisciplinary and this collaboration and to foster the sharing of ideas, knowledge, data, and result between researcher and stakeholder from different disciplines. Healthcare provider, industry, pharma, regulatory authorities, as well as health technology assessor. And the results are clear. ERA PerMed is the biggest ERNet on health with 62 funded projects in 2072 and invested funding since 2018. As you know, can imagine, to be successfully implemented, this approach need to include strategy on how to better involve patients and citizens in all stages of the process. And we are encouraging this engagement and we are pushing the training of the different key contributors and stakeholders needed for the implementation of personal medicine approach. This is a fourth transnational call. We have 30 funding organizations on board from 23 countries and an estimated budget near 25 million of euro. And we are waiting an extension for the next call in 2022. I wish you a usable information day and a successful score result. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guglielmi, for your support in the call and for your welcome. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Maria Cristina Nieto Garcia, member of the Spanish National Institute of Health, Carlos III, and coordinator of the ERA PerMed. The floor is yours, Cristina.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose. Thank you very much, Dr. Guglielmi, for organizing this info day for the ERA PerMed Joint Transnational Call 2021. I don't know if you can upload my presentation. As Maria Jose said, I'm the coordinator of ERA PerMed. And Maria Jose, sorry, I cannot see the presentation. Can you see it?
You have to upload another time the presentation.
Okay, okay. I'm uploading it. Sorry. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I will introduce very briefly ERA PerMed, the ERAnet on personalized medicine. ERA PerMed is the ERAnet in personalized medicine, and it's the biggest ERAnet in health. Its time frame is 5 years. It began in 2017, and its consortium is formed by 32 funding organizations from 23 countries. From them, 19 European countries, 3 associated countries, and 1/3 country, Canada. 5 regions are as well represented in the consortium. The coordination is carried out by the National Institute of Health, Carlos III, which I represent. The activities of this initiative are disseminated through our ERA PerMed website, our Twitter account, and the ERA PerMed newsletter that are periodically published. As Dr. Guglielmi said before, ERA PerMed is very closely connected with the International Consortium of Personalized Medicine, since ERA PerMed is a member of the IC PerMed family. that are formed by different initiatives focused on the field of personalized medicine. The IC PerMed documents are as well consulted while preparing ERA PerMed goals. Here I can represent you an overview of the ERA PerMed calls participation in the last 3 calls that we have already launched. The first co-funded call in 2018 and 2 additional calls with non-co-funding by the European Commission. As you can see, the competitiveness is very high in this program, but we have been successfully funded a great deal of projects, so we really encourage all of you to participate in this new call 2021 that Maria Jose will present you afterwards. We have received so far a lot of time extension requests from the late ERA PerMed projects that have been funded in the last calls due to the pandemic situation. To be able to provide time extensions to these projects so they can fulfill their goals, we have requested a 1-year extension for the ERANet per se. So this way we could be able especially to provide time extensions to the co-funded projects. Additionally, we are planning to launch a potential call in 2022, ensuring transnational personalized medicine funding and bridging the gap between the end of the ERA PerMed ERANet and the beginning of the future partnerships on personalized medicine. Regarding the European Partnership on Personalized Medicine, it was presented in the joint workshop for IC PerMed and ERA PerMed members in September last year. And upon request of the European Commission, a draft concept paper had been elaborated by the preparatory group that is formed by the members of ERA PerMed, members of IC PerMed, and some representatives of the European Commission. This document is ready for the European member states group consultations, and the partnership is expected to start in 2023. Regions are highly encouraged to participate as well as the member states in this European partnership. And finally, I would like to introduce you a brief note of the IC PerMed conference that will take place in February, 25-26 of February, and is focused on personalized medicine from vision to practice. Instead of hosting it in Paris as it was already initially planned, due to the COVID situation, it will be held on a virtual format. It's organized by ANR on behalf of IC PerMed and financially supported by the European Commission. And in this link, you can accede to the program of the conference and the registration link that is still open. Sorry. The speakers of this conference are high-level speakers, and here you can consult the names of the speakers as well as the panel discussion experts. And the topics of the sessions of the conference will cover different aspects of the personalized medicine, such as engage patients and citizens, implementation in the healthcare systems, data harmonization and data management, socioeconomic aspects, and also a lesson learned from the COVID-19 pandemic situations applied to the field of the personalized medicine. I encourage all of you to participate as well in this conference, since it will be very interesting. Thank you very much, all of you, for your attention. I only wanted to add that all the questions can be, after the info day, can be issued by the Mentimeter that Maria Jose will explain further. And here is the access code of this Mentimeter to follow your questions. And here is also our address as the coordination unit. Nothing else. Thank you very much, Maria Jose, for organizing this event. Thank you all of you, all the audience, for following the event. We really hope that you encourage to present your proposals, and we wish you all the best luck for being selected in your research projects. be funded by ERA PerMed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cristina, for your introduction in the ERA PerMed initiative. Now it's my turn. Then I will start with the presentation. Okay, then welcome everyone. We will start with you some important aspect following the question that we received during the registration, such as the scope, timing, research consortium, and evaluating process. But please, before starting, keep in mind these two key aspects in the title: multidisciplinarity research and clinical support tools for personal medicine implementation. I'm sure that the definition of personal medicine, remember that it puts the patient in the very central of the healthcare and refers to individuals, phenotypes and genotypes for the right therapeutic, the right person at the right time, including susceptibility and studies on prevention. Regarding the disease focused in the call, personal medicine is not the disease specific, and then research projects in every disease entity are encouraged. In this bar chart, you can see the medical area targeted since 2018 with similar tendency in the different calls. And on the right, the highest number of the proposal from oncology, neurology, cardiovascular, and immunology. If you would like to check on the projects already funded, take a look at the newsletter. You can save it only by filling in the request in this link. And then now let's continue with the fourth call. It's supported by 30 different funding organizations. That is the call steering committee. And if you want to participate as partner receiving funding in this call, you have to be eligible for one of these funding organizations. There are from 23 countries, 16 European countries, 3 associated countries, and 4 third countries. Please note that Brazil are on board with several funding state agencies. We have also 5 regions and 1 charity. And consider this country classification when you choose a partner. Then if you want a partner, please activate your profile in the ERA PerMed partnering tool. You can present your collaboration offers and also find partners, setting up the research, including keywords, the research area, and also type of organization. If you can find the group profile closest to your research, also in a print format. And which are the eligible partners? There are the academia, the research institutes, clinical, public health sector, and also clinicians, and private partners as a small or medium enterprise. But please check your agency for the national regulation regarding the eligible partners. And this call promotes research and innovation activities with clinical research, computer science, medical informatics, and research on ethical, legal, and social aspects. This implies a multidisciplinarity activity by different stakeholders, and the primary goal is to improve disease prevention and disease management. And following this goal, main objectives: translational and transnational research projects, promote interdisciplinarity collaboration and collaboration between all the stakeholders on the personal medicine. As regards the different preview, I will not go into detail, but the important is that the research area and the scope of the individual modules has been adapted in the different calls. Then the important for you is the eligibility rules. For example, what module, what research areas mandatory, how connect work package with research modules, and remember, include a main PI for module. In this call, this co-funded call 2018, the proposal was to focus into these research areas, from preclinical research to clinical research, at integrating big data and IGT solutions with these two modules. In the call 2019, we have included three research area, responsible implementation in healthcare with two modules. And here the proposal must address at least one module of research area 3 and at least one module of the research area 1 or 2. In the 2020 call, we have included two more modules in this area 3, citizens and patient empowerment and training strategy. Here, each proposal must address at least one module of the research area 3, at least one module of the research area 1 or 2. Going back to the K call, you have the multidisciplinarity, the clinical support tools, and the personal medicine implementation. It is constructed around the three research areas, from preclinical to clinical research, information and communication technology with the application in the healthcare, and responsible implementation of the healthcare with health economic research and health aspects. In this call, you have mandatory the clinical research, the application in healthcare, the ethical, legal, and social aspect. Of course, you can include preclinical health economic research, but the additional value of all must be clearly described. Please check in the Annex 2 of the call text if you found an agency can fund or is able to fund the different modules. In the call test, you have a very good description of all the research area. Then I will pick up only some elements linked to your question during the registration. The research area, the most important is the preclinical data to the clinical research and beyond, how implementation of the technology and research findings will be transformed into clinical practice and address regulatory questions, important the studies on known biomarkers and therapeutic targets. In preclinical model, important the validation of every kind of data and the prediction of clinical outcomes. Important studies of classification of the disease at the molecular level and studies on biomarkers and predictive model. Regarding the module B, mandatory, you have a broad and interesting possibilities that can be applied to it. Just the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics studies are very welcome. Innovative clinical trial methodologies, novel strategies to accelerate the transition from clinical observation to diagnostic development. And as you can imagine, the clinical trials could be difficult to develop in 3 years of project. Then small exploratory clinical studies are accepted in this call. It can be pilot studies, randomized or not, who allow the first approach to a future clinical trial, and feasibility studies that serve to estimate important parameters such as scientific, economics, and so needed to design the future main study. Remember also the importance of the environmental data integration, the study in patients with comorbidities, validation of clinical support tools, and also the medical and health and health and telemedicine application and validation. Then regarding the module 2, application in healthcare, this is the two concepts that you have to be in mind: reuse and the insert of data, reuse of combination of existing tools. All the application of the different new personal medicine tools and the application of this in the interpretation of the clinical data. In the guidelines for applicants, you can find interesting links to identify what can be the European research infrastructure more useful for you, to identify samples already collected and data already present. In this line, you can also present studies on artificial intelligence approach to big data, to support a new subgroup of patients, to predict patient outcomes, and for biomarkers validation. Important the development of good practice for the management of the samples of the data, an approach for innovative and combined use of already validated new health and medical health. Important also studies and telemedicine application for direct contact between healthcare professional and patient. Also because we are in this critical pandemic situation. And then the area of responsible implementation of healthcare. Here, the most important is the studies conducted in this area, and the corresponding work package should relate directly to the research question addressed in area 1 and 2. Regarding health economic research on innovative approach, and also health economic and pharmacoeconomic models, always patient-centered. For the module of ELSA, research on ELSA aspect in every tool of personal medicine. Important also from the interpretation of the clinical data, from the information to the patient, and the creation of the support tools. The regulatory approval for clinical decisions, for the prevention and stratification of the healthy population, equal access for all the patients, right to know or not to know, and sharing the research findings, and how to enroll and collaborate with all the stakeholders. Now, regarding the more practical aspect, this call, this have two stages: pre-proposal phase, full proposal, and please check your funding agencies. You need to do the pre-eligibility test before send us the pre-proposal. This first step is you passing the eligibility test in this step. We have not a peer meeting, but the TSG member decide which pre-proposal will be invited to full proposal submission. And then after the full proposal solution, reviewers meet in a peer review panel to discuss all the proposal and to produce a ranking list recommended with the proposal recommended for funding. Based in this rank list in the available fund, the TSG select the projects to be funded. Just some information regarding the pre-proposal. Read carefully all the instructions, and also the instruction for the electronic submission system, because this document and also the full proposal has to be sent mandatory with the electronic submission. Please register in this system as soon as possible because you need to be familiar with them, and read carefully all the requests for this form. And regarding the financial plan, I want to to share with you that every partners need to be responsible of the coherent distribution of the requested budget following their funding agency rules. And also the coordinator have to check this before to send the proposal. Regarding the timeline, you know that the 4th of March is the deadline for the submission of the proposal. Then we start with the evaluation of the first stage, and the decision of the proposal that will be invited to the full proposal will be around May. In this moment, you can include a partner from the underrepresented country in your proposal. Then start the evaluation of the second stage. Remember that in this stage, we have the rebuttal phase that is very important because you can reply to the comments of the reviewer, and this letter will be taken into account during the discussion of the proposal to be funded. Take this seriously because I know that it's in August, but that will be in August, but it's important, this rebuttal phase. Then in September, we'll start the negotiation on the funding decision, and I hope to have the final the funding decision at the end of September or the beginning of October. So regarding the evaluation process, the evaluation starts with the distribution of the one proposal to 3 reviewers, following 3 evaluator criteria: excellence, impact, and implementation. They give you a score from 0 to 5, and the threshold is 3. Below 9, the project is non-fundable. And then the PRP established the list of the proposal recommended for funding and not recommended for funding. The pre-proposal evaluation depends on the general budget rules and the RAC list, and more or less 50 proposals can be invited to the full proposal. The first proposal states the negotiation following the RAC list try to fund many projects as possible by optimizing the regional, the national budget. It'd be a good number if 20 projects can be funded. For the different evaluation criteria, I go over very quickly because you have all the criteria very well described in the call test. Just to pick up from the excellence, the clarity of the relevance of the proposal and the quality of the consortium. For the impact, the adds national collaboration and the potential impact on the expected results. For the implementation, the quality of the project plan and the coherent integration and combination of the research and modules in the proposal. These days, we are selecting the panel of the reviewer. The selection is based on the experience, the different research area, the medical field, and also taking into account the geographic and gender balance and the good skill in the evaluation process. They sign the conflict of interest and the confidentiality. If you are interested in increasing your knowledge in the evaluation process and strengthening your network and your position internationally, please check your conflict of interest and contact us to be part of the panel. And how many partners in every consortia? At least 3 partners from 3 different countries participating in the call. Maximum number in the proposal 6. You can add 1 partner from the underrepresented country in the full proposal. At least 2 partners from 2 different EU members of associated countries. Every project partner has to be represented by 1 principal investigator. The coordinator represents a research group of partners and must be eligible. Please avoid applying to different calls for the same research activity, and note that the double funding is not permitted. We encourage the active involvement of the public in the proposal, the inclusion of sex, gender analysis, and underrepresented population, and a good policy in data ops and access and the data management. Regarding the patient involvement, is also encouraged from this unit, and this includes patient, healthcare providers, and also patient organization. The goal is to share knowledge and to improve the dialogue between the different stakeholders. And the interdisciplinarity, clear impact, benefit for the patient, coherent integration and combination in the work package, modular, partners, work package and complementarity of the partners, and also the active participation of early career research is very welcome. And if you have been selected for funding, remember that you have to must establish the start data of the scientific project. And you have to send the data management plan no later than 3 months after the start data. And you have to sign the consortium agreement no later than 6 months after the scientific start data. And to join this call, if you are a researcher, you can strengthen the network, you can decide funding and increase your international position. You can increase your knowledge and your technology transfer. If you are an expert on our panel of evaluation, you can increase your knowledge of the process of evaluation and strengthening the network and improve your international position. Thanks on the Secretariat, and please remember the Mentimeter coder for the questions. Now, it's a pleasure to me to invite our first speaker, Agata Ferretti, that is from the Department of Health Science and Technology from ATG in Zurich. Her research includes the ethical, health-related big data and artificial intelligence for personal medicine. And today, she will introduce the ethical implication of big data and artificial intelligence for personal medicine. Please, Agata, is your floor. Okay, now I think Agata has some problem with the audio. Then I go the floor to Nick. Is possible? Then I will introduce Nick. Nick is Professor of Implementation Science and Patient Safety at the King College of London. One of the Nick research lines is the methodological developments for the conduct of implementation studies and measurement of the implementation outcomes within healthcare setting. His task is about research implementation and patient collaboration. Please, Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Jose. Can you hear and see the slides okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, fantastic. So I will spend the next 15 minutes giving some information and insights which might help those attending the call to think about engaging and involving patients and the wider public with a view to achieve research implementation as per the requirements of the call. I'm delighted to be with you today and hope to do something useful. And then we can pick up some questions later. My presentation is very complementary to what Agatha will present, and I'm sure that we will resolve those issues, the sound issues later. If you look at the middle of my slide, please, for those of you who joined us a bit later, use this Mentimeter code for this event to ask questions and interact with us. The questions that are asked, or some of those questions, we'll be able to go through later. So the code is the number that appears in the middle of my slide. So as I said, what we're briefly aiming to achieve today is this. I want to give you a bit of background as to what we mean by patient involvement in developing and implementing research, because the two are not, I will argue, so separate from each other in many ways. In fact, some of the questions we have received already sort of have raised this issue, and I will address it. Secondly, I will offer you a framework. It's not something that I have developed, but it's something that some colleagues have developed, which discusses how best and where to involve patients and their families and their carers in research and implementation. And I will conclude with a couple of slides with very practical tips and advice based on this evidence and my own experience of doing so in the field. We cannot really implement research, we have found, without engaging with patients, the users of services, and often their families and relatives. So the first thing to say is the sort of the basic premise, if you like, the reason we're all here talking about this today is this. The patients, the users of our health services, including personalized medicine, all aspects of it, and a wider network of people, so the families, the people they live with, the people who care for them, they are core stakeholders in any implementation, especially implementation of novel pathways, novel technologies, and novel policies. There are, of course, other stakeholders. You and myself, I mean, I'm a scientist, but most of my time, I have a healthcare role, but I'm predominantly an implementation scientist. I carry out research. This is what King's College is paying me to do. I put in research bids like you do. I am a stakeholder. I have policymaker and manager stakeholders in what I do. Of course, I interact with frontline providers and staff, but it's absolutely critical that that part of my interaction includes patients and service users. This is something that the WHO has recognized and is said again and again, that we need to take these guys on board when we decide, when we design our projects. And then we get to the why. So is this so? Sometimes it's not self-evident. So we have to think about, why do we say so much, we care so much about engaging patients? And these are just some of the reasons. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the sort of things as a scientist I'm keeping in my mind all the time. First of all, it's ethical. This is what we should be doing. And Agatha will talk about ethics far more. I'm not an ethicist myself. The research that we do, the services we develop, the technologies that we develop are aimed at these people. So therefore, they have to have a say. Because this is, otherwise, we're developing materials for people who have no view on what is needed and what they can use. Secondly, it promotes accountability for publicly funded research programs like this one. The patients and the public actually fund the research we do. This is based on your taxes and my taxes, and therefore, they do have to keep us responsible and accountable for how we spend this funding. Thirdly, and very practically, doing so is meant to enhance the effectiveness of our research. I mean, the clinical effectiveness of our research, because by including patients and service users, we have a better chance of achieving improved outcomes and patient experience, because the patients are more likely to use the research that we produce because it's tailored to their needs. Which brings me to the next point. Involving patients and service users allows us to improve our design, the research design, the design of the technology, the implementation of the technology. And therefore, it reduces what has been described as wasted research. So they can advise us on things that they would do or they wouldn't do. We can take that into account at the early stage of the research, and therefore we avoid making assumptions about what people would do. So we use these views early on to inform the design of our interventions. And finally, people are saying that it accelerates our impact. Ultimately, the reason we're doing this, the reason we're developing personalized medicine interventions and any other pathway and device is because we're trying to achieve scalability, to achieve that once we have something that we've proven is effective, it will be adopted and used. So having patients on board accelerates that process of reaching that impact because the patients help us get there. So these are some of the reasons why this is important. Now, of course, the question becomes, well, how do you do it? So this is the framework that I was talking to you about earlier. So it's published quite recently in a very well-known journal. So and these guys, what they did, they reviewed the literature and then they did a Delphi consensus, so a formalized, standardized consensus process when they were asking the questions, where and how do we involve patients in implementing evidence into practice? So if you read this paper, which I definitely advise you to do so, it's an open access paper, so you can just download it even as I speak. They arrived at 4 main elements of agreement where all the experts that took part in this Delphi agreed that patients should be involved. So these are the 4 bullet points on this slide. So first of all, they agreed strongly that the patient should be involved in setting the priorities in the research questions. Secondly, in planning the research. Thirdly, in doing the research, conducting the research. And finally, in disseminating, sharing, and using the research. Now, I would propose to you that if you are attending this call, you can definitely think about the second, the third, and the fourth bullet point. Obviously, the priority is already set. This is a personalized medicine call, but how you plan it, how you conduct the research, and how eventually, years later, you disseminate and use the research is where patients can help you. So let's see what this framework suggested. So this is a bit more detail that comes from this framework. So in terms of planning the research, there was good agreement, there was very strong agreement. The patient should be involved in how informed consent forms should be designed, what should go on them, and how the process of obtaining informed consent should be done. So a very clear direction of travel for all of us. Secondly, review and input to research proposals for funding, basically where you guys are now thinking about applying. This is where patients can come in and contribute. In terms of doing the research, if you get funded, then setting the agenda for meetings and coordinating how patient and public will remain involved throughout your research project is something that the patients can undertake, and also offering governance. So ensuring that you guys, from a scientific point of view, are acting responsibly within the parameters of public good and delivering things that are relevant to the patients. And finally, sharing and using the research. There's strong agreement in this paper that patients can contribute to dissemination through giving talks and lectures, co-authoring papers, which is a novelty, but is happening increasingly. So like you would co-author your papers, include patients in that process, write reports and so on, and also offer directions for future research, where you're going after this project is finished. Now, having said all of this, we also need to look at the limitations of the evidence base and some if you like, points of tension that we have. We haven't really resolved all these issues. There is good evidence, for example, that involving patients changes the research and the services, even the health service that we're offering, and I've got the reference there for you, so you can go and check them. But if you look at the last 20 years, we're not very sure what is the actual clinical effectiveness that this achieves. Clinical effectiveness remains a goal, but we don't always have a very clear evidence that is being met by including patients in the research. There's also good evidence of beneficial impacts on both the researchers and the scientists and also the patients. So we know that the patients report feeling empowered, having value to add, and they gain confidence, they become more aware of their own conditions, and they gain life skills by getting engaged in research projects. And researchers, on the other hand, they gain a better understanding of their own field. Their respect increases, and they build good rapport, relationship with the community, which often lasts several years. But what is, as I said, remains unclear is how we actually measure all of this. And there was a very recent paper published last year in a new journal, Research Involvement Engagement, that argues that we shouldn't be measuring a lot of clinical parameters. We should instead looking at the philosophy of engaging patients and what that might achieve, the duty of care we have to patients and the public in involving them in our research. This is really interesting paper. It's more theoretical, if you like. If you're really interested in this research, this last paper is quite thought-provoking. So a couple of final slides with some practical advice for you, which hopefully addresses some of your questions, and then I'll conclude and pass on to Agatha. In terms of recruiting your patients, because you're in this potentially at that stage, for those of you who don't have a network, use an existing network. If you're in a hospital, your university, there might be patient groups that you already work with, or your university, your colleagues might be working with. Use those that are there already. Consider whether there is a patient advocacy organization. We're not talking about individuals. Regionally or nationally, you might have an organization, for example, that's interested in mental health, that's interested in cardiology, that's interested in urological conditions. You know, no matter what it is, think about whether you can engage with them or whether any of your organizations is already engaged. These patient advocacy organizations are usually very happy to support scientists. Consider using social media. People do recruitment these days through social media, example, Twitter. People do Twitter polls to gather some initial reactions to their ideas. But of course, be mindful that there are some people who do not use social media. So just be mindful who you might engage like this. Engage with enough people, but not too many. So if you've got a research group of about half a dozen scientists and you include one patient, I would say that's not enough, because there's not enough space for them to have a voice in your project meetings. I would say 2 or 3, depends on your project, but 2 or 3 people feel more comfortable interacting with the research team. And make sure that you don't recruit the so-called usual suspects. So people like me, white, middle class, older, and men. There's a lot of us already engaged in these processes. We need to include a wider, more diverse audience. People of ethnic minorities, people who are often not represented in this research, and they're left out. We need to make a strong effort to engage with them. The second piece of advice, is to include them early in your proposal development and explain to them very clearly what you expect them to do. Allow the time for them to read them, comment on your ideas and your drafts. Don't send them something on a Monday, wanting back on a Tuesday, because patients have got other things to do. They're not full-time scientists. If the time is short, I would say practically that at least one of your patients has had experience of doing this before, because it is a process for someone to understand how a research bid is being built. And all of you guys and all of us are doing this all the time. But for some of the patients, this will be really new. So you need someone who knows about it somewhat. Final slide. Encourage and allow time for proposal development. Try not to rush things. You've got a few weeks ahead of you. Be clear that you as research leaders, you set out the leadership and the culture of your group. Make sure this is open. Patients need to feel able to speak. They need to have time in the meetings. They need to have your support. When you start talking, especially in personalized medicine, very easy to use a lot of acronyms. Avoid the acronyms. Sometimes even researchers do not understand them. Of course, patients might not even know them. You should factor in that your meetings will be longer. There's evidence for this. All meetings are longer when you include members of the community. I would say to you from experience, allow 50% more. If you have a meeting for 1 hour, make it an hour and a half. That's my personal experience of how long it takes. And also, if the patients always agree with what you're saying, well, maybe you need to allow them to be a bit more challenging. Maybe they're not very confident in bringing up their ideas. Ensure you reimburse them. Patients cannot do this for free. We're doing this. We've got university salaries and hospital salaries. Write in a budget, I would propose. And of course, the organizers of the call will know how best to do that. Make sure you cost the time for your patients to attend the meetings, transportation costs, if we get to the stage where we're able to meet face-to-face. Reimburse the time they read and comment on documents, because this is not a full-time job for them, so they can't do it for free. And finally, be very clear when you write your bids, how you included the patients. This is a really strong aspect of your bid. You need to be very clear, very articulate about this and explain what the roles will be, because someone reviewing those bids, the referee, will want to see what specifically the patients will do. So explain how many meetings, how regular the meetings, the duration of the meetings, the other activities, and how you will offer training and support, and be very clear on how you cost and how you will resource all of those things. This is just from my experience of putting in several bids with patients on. So this is all I had to say to you. I think we've come to just about 15 minutes. These are my contacts if I can be of any help, but of course I'm not. I'm here just to offer a perspective on this topic, and I will take your questions after Agatha has completed her talk too. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you to you, Nick. Very nice and very useful introduction on the complex field of the patient engagement. Now we want to give the floor to Agatha.
Can you
Agatha
hear
is
Agatha?
Yes, Agatha. Okay, go. Your
Can you
floor.
also see me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you again for the invite, and sorry for the technical issues. I'm Agatha Ferretti. I work at the Health Ethics and Policy Lab at ETH, and today I would like to offer you some reflection about the ethical implication of big data and artificial intelligence for personalized medicine. I hope this presentation will fit following the one from Nick, and I would like to raise again some ethical questions that might be useful for you during your planning of the proposal, but also when you carry out actually the project. If you have any question, again, you can scan the QR code or input the code into Mertimer. So just very briefly, I would like to show you how quickly we develop and the digital medical field, and we have an exponential increase in the healthcare data that we are producing, and that we have been producing in the last decade, I would say. So many data that the volume of data is so exaggerated that basically we cannot even store all the data that we produce, as you can see in the bottom right of this slide. And this is a very interesting aspect, again, quite recent. And I would draw your attention on two main points. First, this, again, digitalization of the medical sphere, specifically considering how we transform the medical records that have been traditionally written on papers, handily written by doctors, to the digitalized form of them. So having the electronic health records, medical records, which are more and more available in the, let's say, high-income economies, but also in high-income countries, but also in the developing economies. For example, they're adopted now often in low and middle economies, such as, for example, Thailand, Brazil, Nigeria, and many more countries. The second aspect that I think it's really relevant is the explosion of the genome sequencing and the reduction in cost of this process, which obviously produced an enormous amount of data that have been stored and collected and stored. And this also not only in the genomic, but also in other omics fields. So more and more data, more and more medical data, but also more and more human data in general. And this is true in many sectors. For example, we now collect data concerning our location, data coming from our social media, data about our fitness, for example, through tracking devices and wearables, data collected about our purchases online or credit card purchases in general. And all these data that are not medical data, right? They can actually in practice be merged together, analyzed, and they can be used to infer the health status of a person, despite, again, not being strictly medical data. And this is possible nowadays thanks to the power of AI and the predictive analytics, such as machine learning, for example. And this is used already in the field of medicine, using, for example, the information we have from images. So using, for example, machine learning to analyze the images of melanoma, so skin cancer. But this is also used, for example, to predict the obesity in populations, simply analyzing the information concerning the grocery data. Or, for example, using data from social media to predict the suicidal risk. And so this slide is just to show you how different data from different sectors, again, genomics, clinical data, but also data concerning people's behaviors and participant contributed data can be merged together and be useful when predicting diseases, but also to deliver the most efficient treatment, for example, for a specific population group. So now, what are the ethical challenges? I would like to present you some topics that might be interesting for you. First of all, the digital divide. I'm sure that if you work in this field, you already had to deal with some of these issues. For example, the quality of infrastructure. Quality of infrastructure is not the same around the world, and also concerning the data about, like, information about and structure, informational structure about, for example, introducing the medical health records, the recorded the records online. Countries like Finland are very are ready to implement them, but other countries are not so much ready. For example, Switzerland is still in the process of building an infrastructure when to implement this type of tools. The same applies to mobile technology as accessibility. These technologies are not accessible in the same way all around the world. For example, countries like Italy do not have, part of the population in Italy, more than 60% of people above 50 years old do not access internet or do not have a smartphone device. So obviously, if you plan to, in your project, to use this type of technologies, might be, you have to be aware, obviously, also of the accessibility of the technology. We have digital divide also in terms of accessibility of this technology among gender. So female in certain countries have less access to digital technology than men. So this is very important, as well as the digital literacy and digital health training that of the people you are going to work with, both, again, the patients, but also the healthcare workers in the hospitals, which often do not have the training necessary or required to take on projects that involve medical mobile technologies. The same also, and this obviously has an impact on the quality of data that you collect, because if you don't reach out the population or the sample of the population you want, you might have very poor quality data or very, very limited data and non-representative data and data that are hard to be merged together because they come from very different sources, disparate data, not curated data. And so you have to think also how you will deal with this type of issue, which is technical, but obviously has also ethical implications, because if you have very low quality data or limited data sets that have unwanted bias in them, obviously you can carry on these biases also within in the model that you run. And if you don't pay attention and try to obviously adjust for these unwanted biases in the data set or in the machine learning model that you might use to analyze this data, you will have results that are not generalizable, that might perpetuate existing prejudice, concerning a specific population group, for example, and that potentially might also exacerbate disparities in healthcare, right? So it's really important to consider this topic, and also biases like in the technology might introduce lack of trustworthiness in the technology itself from the users of the technology, for example, the doctors or the patients. And this is especially true in if you deploy AI technologies that rely on machine learning, because they let's say often they rely on let's say algorithms that have been described as kind of black boxes, right? So algorithms that are kind of hard to interpret, hard to analyze, hard to explain. And this difficulty in explanation can reduce also scientific explainability, but also findings validation. So it's hard for a doctor that doesn't really understand what's going on and how the machine came to its conclusion, like the doctor sees this correlation existing, but cannot really understand it as a scientific causality. So of course, if you introduce this type of tool, try your best to make them explainable and understandable by your end users. And obviously, if you don't do so, you might increase also accountability issues, because if something goes wrong, who is responsible for the decision suggested by the machine, right? And as I mentioned before, this might reduce physicians and patients' trust in the tool itself, and also reduces patients' trust in the physician, because the patient might, have issues in trusting a doctor that cannot explain exactly how the machine is using works. And so this goes back also to what Nick mentioned before: how should clinicians communicate with patients about the roles of artificial intelligence? When is the right time to do so? Obviously, the literature has explored this topic, so I put here some suggestions, but it's really broad, this topic. So feel free to explore more. Another topic that has been discussed a lot concerns privacy and security. Like is in every conversation about big data, privacy is a hot topic, and obviously it's important to consider that more data are shared, harder it is to keep them private, just because there are more people that access them, and the data might be exploited, might be hacked in many different ways. So these two things go together, like openness and data sharing, but also risk for privacy and confidentiality. And the problem is also risk of identification. Nowadays, we hear a lot talking about anonymization of data, whether there is broad literature, new literature that is coming up showing that actually, even if you use anonymized data, sometimes it's possible to identify the patient or the data subject. And this is because exactly what I showed you at the beginning. Nowadays, we produce so many data coming from a variety of sources, and maybe, again, not medical data necessarily, but putting together many different data, we can infer, again, the health status of a person, or even who is that person. And again, another aspect, inadequate data protection that correlates to the infrastructure problem and the digital divide problem. These topics are really linked together, and if you don't have a strong structure of security in place, obviously you increases the risk for privacy breaches and security breaches. So this obviously is a problem in itself, but it's a big problem because also is linked to tangible risks of harm that you might bring to the patients in case, again, you collect data directly from them, but also at the group level, because again, big data projects obviously often have implications for populations group even more than for the single participant to the study. And this links to another topic often discussed in big data research, which is informed consent. how to collect consent from all the patients or all the data subjects actually you will include in your study. And it seems there is literature about this, again, that the current traditional informed consent is inadequate in big data research. And so many forms or approaches to informed consent have come up in the recent years. So from dynamic consent to non-consenting at all, to electronic consent, to e-consent, to terms of use, for example, in apps and so on. And the picture you see in this slide is an installation from an artist who kind of print the terms of use of the most commonly used social media apps. And you can see this long list of terms and conditions that basically nobody reads, right? But you need to click nevertheless in order to accept them to use the app. So the question is this a real informed consent that we could use for the medical sector or not? And questions will also increase if you use secondary, in case you want to reuse the data, right, for secondary uses of data. Is consent needed in this case? It really depends. Is the answer depends of where you carry on your project. Is highly this topic is regulated often at the local level. So I recommend you to reach out to, for example, the data protection officers in your institutions, but now especially in Europe with GDPR should be in place. And also, obviously, this informed consent issue also bring up some questions concerning how to provide feedback to the patients in the big data context, because if you collect data from a very large number of data subjects, how you reach back to them, especially if you use anonymized or de-identified data, it's really complicated. But I'm happy to talk about it more during the questions if you have any. So another important topic is data sharing and control. Again, I just point out some questions that you might want to explore while you're planning your project or carry on your project. And again, in Europe now we have GDPR that try to respond to some of these questions or orient you in tackling some of these questions. In Switzerland, for example, we have the Swiss Personalized Health Network, CHN, which is trying to build a system and a kind of a framework for data sharing across the country and across different institutions for personalized medicine. So this is just to give you some hints of topics and questions that you might want to explore. Finally, another important topic, I think, is really when you build your project to think about the distribution of risk and benefits. What are the potential risks for the individual, but also for the broader society of using and merging this data and analyzing this data? What type of benefits you like your stakeholders will gain, and if these benefits will be distributed in a fair manner across stakeholders. So again, this goes back to also Nick's presentation, thinking about how your patients will benefit from this, how the broader society will benefit from it, what is the social value of the research, is this social value balanced with the risk for the individual data subjects and participants to your research. So to conclude about your next steps, again, just some suggestions to think about what are the potential ethical issues emerging in your specific project, which stakeholders would be affected by these ethical issues, doctors, patients, the broad society, specific subgroups, vulnerable groups. How do you plan to address and minimize these envisioned risks? I think it's complicated in big data projects to anticipate all the unforeseeable risks, but it's also, I think, the duty of a researcher to kind of, make an effort and try to envision this risk. potential risks, and how will you also monitor the emergence of new ethical challenges over time? Because again, you can imagine that the data you collect now might be reused in the future, and you can for different purposes, and you can anticipate, for example, which challenges could emerge then. And with this, I thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agatha, for this interesting presentation. And I would like to thank to you and to Nick on behalf of the ERA PerMed Consortium for your kind and useful presentation on this Info Day. Thank you very much. Now we can go to the question, but I would give you an piece of advice. Don't worry if I can't reply to all your questions, because we will organize a fact document and we will publish this in the website together with the slides and with the links. Thank you. Then please, could you share the reply to our question in the Mentimeter? Okay. Well, I am happy to see that we have a very broad representation of very different countries. Of course, we have a lot of representatives from Italy, but we are happy to see that we have also Chile, Hungary, Poland, and Egypt, and Croatia, and some other countries. Thank you very much for your participation. Next question, please. And here we can see the different category in the field, and most of you are researchers. But we have also a patient representative. Thank you very much to the patient that has joined us, and also clinicians and private researchers. Please, the next question. Well, regarding the keywords, I see a lot of words, but we have a very nice representation on neuroscience, genomic, biomarkers, and public health, and artificial intelligence. Well, I think we have a very broad field for our application. Next question. Well, we have a very good percent of people decide to apply, 45%. And I hope that those that are not sure can change their mind. Please, could you start with the first question that the audience have sent to us? Wow, how many projects is going to fund? Normally, you have seen in the presentation from Christina or for mine, normally there is around 20 is a good number of projects. Patient organizations are eligible, but you have to check the national and regional rules. If we have an university, it's affiliated in the same consortium. You have the possibility at a maximum at 2 partners from every country. We have patient empowerment and patient involvement. We include patients that are giving us their samples. I think this is a question for Nick. I think that he has also replied to this.
So would you like
Nick,
me to
can you
comment?
Yes,
I will comment briefly. So I agree. The question is very well put. Getting samples from people does not mean they're involved in research. It means that they contribute data, and that's all they do. Involvement in research would mean that the patients or the patient groups are involved in the sort of activity that I described. So they contribute to the thinking around your project, the aims of the project, the metrics, the data to be collected, and all that. And at later stages, they also contribute to the interpretation of what you're finding and the dissemination. So I would consider a whole range of activities. You don't have to have all of them, but to achieve involvement, you need to engage the patients in more than just providing data. This is a passive activity. Involvement is about more proactive and active patient participation in designing research with yourselves as scientists.
Thank you very much, Nick. And then how big can be a clinical trial? As I said to you before, we can't support clinical trial because the project has only 3 years to develop the project. Then if you consider 300, or you have to consider you have to enroll the patient and to develop all the clinical phase. It's up to you, but you can support only a small clinical trial, a small experimental clinical trial. Next question. Every project has the limit of 3 years. It's not problem if the program ends in the 2022. The project is always 3 years. Next. When we apply for the project and pre-proposal, we have to fill in financial data budget. Then every partner is responsible of the coherent distribution of the budget. The coordinator have to check this, but every partner have to follow the national and regional rules from their funding agency. Next, please. It's not obligatory to have a small or medium enterprise. It's encouragement because we have to be involved the most part of the stakeholder that are working in the personal medicine. What are the limits of the informed consent in the relation to big data? I think this is a question for Agatha. Please, Agatha, can you reply to this?
Yeah, well, there are many issues, and it will take a long time to go through all of them. But first of all, it seems that the traditional form of informed consent that was developed, you know, in the mid of the 60s, I would say, even before, to respond to basically the needs of the research of that time, doesn't fit anymore with the complexity of big data research, and especially on the one hand because the number of patients and data subjects, we call it when you involve big data, right? The data subjects that you involve are so high that it's really hard to go back to them and ask informed consent for every time you use their data, especially if you might reuse the data for different purposes. So what we have seen in medical research is to use this broad consent, which basically allow patients to donate their data for multiple purposes as long as they're used in medical research. But obviously this is a topic that could be that is addressed in many different ways. Some people argue for a dynamic form consent, so going back to kind of the patients and the data subjects to re-consent kind of, or to re-express the voluntariness to take part to new uses and new projects and new uses of data. Of course, if the data are reused and the data are shared anonymously, this is also an issue because obviously how you bring back information concerning the results to the patient. So how do you kind of really involve the patients and the data subjects in this way? Like, it's a topic very broad. I'm happy to go more in detail or indicate some of the literature concerning this issue.
Thank you very much, Agatha. Then the next question is, how about the inclusion of the partners from underrepresented countries? Well, the consortia are allowed to include in the full proposal phase a new project partner that is eligible to receive funding from a funded organization that is underrepresented in the first stage, in the stage of the proposal. And the funded organization have to agree to participate in this widening option. The next question. There are any repository of funding or application? Yes, but you can take a look in the newsletter. You can find all the projects funded until now. If the participant withdraw from the project, there's two possibilities. If it occurs before the proposal eligibility, the secretariat give the option to change the partner. If this occurs after the project is funded, then you have to follow the rules of the national agency. It's always difficult to change a partner for another participant, because it's not only depends of the national rule, but also of the expertise of this participant. It's not actually a list of small or medium enterprise, but you can go into the partnering tool and you can find some of them into the partnering tool. And will be there a special attention to the COVID event? Yes, regarding the structure of the call, we have some data that are physics, but we try to be flexible with some of the problems that bring the COVID situation for the researchers. It's possible to submit to ERA PerMed call projects that are already been submitted. Yes, you can, but our recommendation is to take into account the comment that you have received in the call before, and also to read carefully the rules of the call, of the actual call, and the modules that you have to include as mandatory. Yes, it's not limited to the clinical support tool is recommended, but also telemedicine solution is included in these clinical support tools. The underrepresented countries are countries that don't have enough proposal that have been selected for the proposal in relation of the budget destinated for this call. How developed from commercial biotech partners fit in this project? If they can indicate their benefit for the proposal in the field of the personal medicine, they can be included. Yes, it's possible for the countries or for partners from countries that are not participating in the call to be engagement in this call, but you can't be funded, and then you have to participate with your own funding. And for this, you have to demonstrate that you are able to do this kind of research with your funding. Next. Well, I think we have finished with our time. And I would like to thank to all of participants. And please don't worry, we will go back with a fact document that will be in the website as soon as possible. Thank you. I would like also to advise you that the Menti method will continue open to collect more questions and to have the possibility to answer all of you. And thank you very much for all your participation, to the speakers and to the audience, for all the team that has joined us and has helped to organize this Info Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose, and also to Agatha and Nick for your very useful presentations. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.